So first of all, I would like to welcome you all to this first CS lecture, CS 205 lecture on the Epic of Gilgamesh. As you may know, AUB is proud to be a liberal arts institution of higher learning. You hear it in every speech the president gives, in every, apologetic speech that is given about AUB. AUB is the only university here that is an institution of higher learning that focuses on liberal arts. You may wonder what a liberal arts institution or university is. Well, this means very simply that at the undergraduate level, AUB does not intend to form professionals, but rather people who can think critically and rationally, people who are broad-minded, who have been exposed to the cultures that have shaped modern man, people who are aware how man's view of the universe, of the gods, and of himself has evolved across the centuries to shape what we are today. People who can be challenged in their beliefs and in their opinions, and who can engage in a rational dialogue with their fellow men. At the heart of this liberal arts education is the Civilization Program, or CS program. How is CS at the heart of liberal education? Well, let me briefly tell you what CS is about. CS courses stand at a crossroad of different disciplines, such as literature, philosophy, history, social sciences, natural sciences, and others. However, in CS, we do not look at these texts from the point of view of the specialist. We are not biologists, we are not historians, we are not social scientists in CS, but what we want to explore in these texts that we read in CS is man, meaning man, his role, his ideas, his beliefs, his values in each specific framework or context. CS courses are not consist exclusively of texts representative of Eastern and Western culture that was shaped on the shores of the Mediterranean Sea, the Mare Nostrum, our sea, from early antiquity or early history to modern times. While reading the texts, we shall try to understand the point of view of the text itself. We don't want to project our own ideas 2,000 or 3,000 years after 3,000 years of development. We want to look at the text and the point of view of the text itself and its author. The best approach to do this is to explore the basic notions and concepts found in the text, like, for example, notions of justice, of happiness, of good, evil, friendship, love, and death. But these notions and concepts are often not bluntly or directly expressed in the text. There is no definition in your text what is death or what is happiness or what is, justice. They are hinted at in an indirect way, meaning by symbols, all right? So if we want to understand the message of these texts properly, we have to read the symbols, to analyze and to interpret them. This is the main purpose of the CS lecture. So if you listen carefully today, you will understand all the most important ideas or concepts that the Epic of Gilgamesh is bringing us today in a 21st century environment, all right? So the lecture intends to help you understand the text by pointing out to you the main issues that you can further analyze and discuss in class. But of course, if you want to have interesting discussions, sessions, and express an informed opinion, you have to have read the assigned text, because you cannot discuss something that you have no idea about. Now, what is the appropriate way to analyze the text that you are reading? Since the CS approach is mainly concerned with man, the most useful way is to analyze the three basic relationships of man in the world. What are they? The first is the relation of man with himself. How does man come to terms with himself, with his human condition? Who am I? What am I? Where am I going? You know, all these questions that any person, you know, would ask himself or herself. The second basic relationship of man is with his fellow man, with the others, how he tries to come to terms with other human beings. This is the social or communal level of the analysis. Finally, the third relationship of man is with the universe, the cosmos, nature, and the supernatural forces or powers such as gods, fate, chance, you know, all these supernatural powers that we have absolutely no control on, and which affect our lives and over which we have absolutely no control. So this is the cosmological level of the analysis. So the CS program studies human culture in its various expressions. It broadens our understanding of mankind, of our own as well as of other cultures. It is therefore an essential part of a liberal education. This is what we call a liberal education. Now let's turn to our text, to the Epic of Gilgamesh. The Epic of Gilgamesh, an epic is a poem. Asidi is a poem involving heroes, meaning men endowed with superhuman powers, and gods. So we have superhumans and gods as the heroes of an epic, together with the normal people who are, you know, existing around them. Epics have a twofold purpose. First, to entertain the reader or the audience, and second, and most importantly, to give a message about the values, the philosophical, social, and moral standards of a given society at a certain time. In the epic, the hero or heroes represent all these values, and they become the symbols, the representatives of their society and their time. In CS 201, for example, we read two other epics, Homer's Odyssey and Virgil's Aeneid. Maybe in CS 205, you will read these two, epics too. You have, and you will have, if you read them, the opportunity to compare and to contrast these epics and the values they represent for each people, for the Romans in the Aeneid, for the Greeks in the Odyssey, and for the Mesopotamians in the Epic of Gilgamesh. But the Epic of Gilgamesh is the oldest epic known to us in world literature. It is, as one great scholar puts it, the most significant literary creation of the whole of ancient Mesopotamia. So what we are reading here is a great book, is a great work. It is really something that will never lose its importance and its relevance for mankind. Over the years, the story has been variously reworked into plays, novels, and at least 2 operas, just to tell you that it never lost its significance for us. In 2013, a group of young dancers called Antiques Dancers created a hip-hop dance interpretation of the Epic of Gilgamesh. And I gave you the link if you are interested in looking at this hip-hop dance. Finally, this year or last year, in celebration of the SOAS centenary, SOAS is the School of Oriental and African Studies in London, the acclaimed performance storyteller Hagati came to SOAS to give his rendering of the ancient Mesopotamian Epic of Gilgamesh, with musical accompaniments by SOAS alumnus Brody. So, and you have certainly, if you play games, computer games, now you will see that Gilgamesh is becoming one of the heroes accompanying Captain America in his adventures. So even for kids and for the new generation of, of young 21st century children, Gilgamesh is still the hero that we encounter in his epic. So, since the Epic of Gilgamesh is the only sample of Mesopotamian literature that we read in CS, and since most of you, I presume, are not familiar with Mesopotamian civilization, let us dwell for a couple of minutes on the homeland of Gilgamesh so you know where our epic is situated. Well, Mesopotamia, that you see on the slide, is the name given by the Greeks to what is today modern Iraq and northeast Syria. It means, in Greek, the land between the rivers. In Arabic, it is called Bilad al-Rafidain or Bilad ma bayn al-Nahrain. And the two rivers that you see, the western one is the Euphrates, the eastern one is the Tigris. In Arabic, Dijla wal-Furat. You must have heard of them. The geographical setting of the epic is the Mesopotamian south, which was called by its ancient dwellers the land of Sumer and Akkad. In Sumer, on the Euphrates, lies the city of Uruk, which is one of the oldest cities of the ancient Near East. The hero of our epic, Gilgamesh, was a Sumerian king of Uruk. The Sumerians were the earliest settlers or inhabitants of Mesopotamia. Their language cannot be compared with any language we know of, and it cannot be affiliated to any language known to us. The Sumerians were the first inventors of writing. They have developed and used the cuneiform script, Khatt al-Mismari, and they wrote on clay tablets. They were predominantly urban people living in cities. They lived in big fortified cities, and their land was divided into small kingdoms. Together with the Sumerians lived another population group called the Akkadians, after the name of their city, Akkad. These people differed from the Sumerians in that they spoke a language which belongs to the same linguistic family as Arabic and Hebrew and Aramaic and so on. This linguistic family is conventionally called Semitic. The Akkadians obviously came from a different cultural background than the Sumerians, and the peaceful cultural interaction between Sumerians and Akkadians lasted almost 1,000 years. Akkadian rule became predominant in Mesopotamia around 2000 BC, and the Akkadian language progressively replaced Sumerian as both the spoken and official language of the country. So, now that you have an idea about the geographical setting of our epics, the type of people who were living there, Gilgamesh being, a Sumerian king, now we want to come back to our epic. Gilgamesh is now believed to be a real, historical, and not a legendary figure. He was a Sumerian king who ruled some 4,500 years ago, and who became, after his death, like many other great kings in antiquity, like Alexander the Great, like Sargon of Akkad, all these great names who built empires, he became the hero of many tales. In these tales, he was given a semi-divine and superhuman features. The tales about Gilgamesh were first transmitted orally, like Sirat Antara. People sit and start telling stories about these great men. So they were transmitted by word of mouth. Later on, several of these tales were fixed in writing in the Sumerian language. 5 of them came down to us, 5 such tales. And these tales were originally not connected. In other words, they did not form a unit, a complete whole story, one single epic. In the final phase of this epic evolution, almost a millennium after the hero's death, after Gilgamesh's death, these tales were joined together into a literary composition written in Akkadian and with a unified theme and a meaningful plot. This final integrated and coherent version of the epic was written in the new language, in the Semitic language, in Akkadian. It is this final text that you are going to read and that we are going to discuss in this lecture. The most complete version of the text was written on 12 clay tablets, and it was discovered for the first time in the library of the Assyrian king Ashur-banipal, who ruled between 669 and 627 BC in Nineveh, in northern Iraq, Nineveh. The text of the standard version is partly destroyed, and some passages remain obscure. The discovery of some 50 fragments of this epic in various cities of the ancient Near East, because this is a story that was famous all over the ancient Near East, and people copied it and people read it because it was, like today the Odyssey or the Iliad, a very famous work. So these tablets that were found all over the ancient Near East enabled scholars to fill some of these gaps and to improve our understanding of the text. Now, what is this story about? This final Akkadian version of the epic appears to have been more interested in the message its author saw in Gilgamesh's life rather than in Gilgamesh himself. What he wanted to tell us was, what do we understand? What is the message that he wanted to give us is in the way Gilgamesh spent his life and reacted to all the issues during his lifetime. This message that he wanted to convey to us is concerned with people's attitude towards life and death. I quote from your book. The story begins by introducing the hero to us, Wild Bull of Lugal Banda. Lugal Banda is his father, Gilgamesh's father. Gilgamesh, the perfect in strength, suckling of the august wild cow, the goddess Ninsun. Gilgamesh was his name from the day he was born, 2/3 of him God and 1/3 human. So, from his mother, the goddess Ninsun, he inherited beauty and restlessness. From his human father, Lugal Banda, he inherited what we all inherit from our fathers and mothers, mortality. In the epic, Gilgamesh is characterized by tremendous vigor, strength, energy. He harasses the young men and the young girls of Uruk, and he takes them away from their families. No son is left with his father, for Gilgamesh takes them all, even the children. Yet the king should be a shepherd to his people, not a tyrant. His lust leaves no virgin to her lover, neither the warrior's daughter nor the wife of the noble. Bad thing about Gilgamesh. So the people of Uruk, as you can imagine, were not happy with this oppressive situation. They complained to who is higher and stronger and more powerful than Gilgamesh. And these are the gods. So they complained to the gods. The gods perceived with remarkable insight that it was Gilgamesh's superior energy and strength which set him apart and made him feel lonely. He found nobody who could match him, who could be, his equal, to play with him, to go around with him. All the others were too weak for him. So he needed a friend. Basically, this is what was his problem. He needed a friend, someone who measured up to him. So the gods created a counterpart of Gilgamesh, Enkidu. The gods cried to Aruru, the goddess of creation. They told her, "You made him, O Aruru. Now create his equal. Let it be as his own reflection, his second self, stormy heart for stormy heart. Enkidu, his counterpart, was born in the steppe, not in the city. The wild area, the steppe is the wild area around the city of Uruk. He represents man in the state of nature, like Mowgli, for those of you who know, who have seen Jungle Book. He lives with and like the wild animals of the steppe. One day, a trapper sees him destroying the traps set to catch the wild animals. He makes his way to Uruk, appeals to Gilgamesh, and asks for a woman from the city, what your text calls a harlot, to go with him to try to seduce Enkidu. His request is granted, and for a whole week, Enkidu enjoys himself with Samkhat, the harlot. When he wants to go back to his animal companions after the experience he had with the woman, well, the animals shy away from him. He has lost his old power and speed. He cannot run with the animals anymore. So Enkidu is bound to leave the steppe. He leaves it with the harlot, and he meets in the surroundings of the city of Uruk live the shepherds. So he meets the shepherd and finally goes to the city of Uruk. There he meets Gilgamesh and fights with him. Out of their battle grows a lasting friendship. Gilgamesh and Enkidu achieve together great deeds, and this is what you will read in the text. They go to the cedar mountain, kill the monster Humbaba, the symbol of evil. Upon their return, the goddess Ishtar, the goddess of love and war, falls in love with Gilgamesh and asks him to marry her. Gilgamesh insolently refuses to marry the best, the greatest goddess of all. And he refuses her offer and reminds her of the fate of all her former lovers. Remember, you killed them all, Ishtar, so I don't want to be one of them. Upset by his refusal, Ishtar goes to her father, Anu, the god of heavens, and asks him to give her the bull of heavens, who is a monster, in order to destroy Gilgamesh. The two friends fight against the bull and kill him. And this is represented on several objects from Mesopotamia, because it was a very, very famous scene, Enkidu and Gilgamesh killing the famous bull of heaven. Beside themselves with success, the two friends defy and insult the gods. They had gone too far, and this insolence brought upon them the punishment, the retribution of the gods. Enlil, the god of the air, decided by decree the death of Enkidu. One of them had to die, and it was Enkidu because he was the one who stabbed the bull of heaven. Enkidu's death is the central event in the epic. It is the event that brings the focus upon the main theme of the epic, namely Gilgamesh's quest for immortality. After the loss of his friend, Gilgamesh becomes obsessed by death, and he tries to win real immortality. In his quest for everlasting life, he goes to meet Utnapishtim, the Mesopotamian counterpart of biblical Noah, Nuh, the only person who survived the flood, Tufan, and the only man who was granted immortality by the gods. So you see that the topos of Nuh or Noah is a very old one. It's a topos or a story that existed thousands of years before, it is known, it was written down in the Bible. So the two friends, Then, on his way to him, Gilgamesh meets Siduri, the winemaker, who sees the hopelessness of his quest and tries to dissuade him. Gilgamesh goes on, and after many hardships, finds Utnapishtim, and The latter, that is Utnapishtim, gives him 2 chances to win immortality. But twice, Gilgamesh fails because of his human weakness and negligence. After this failure, Gilgamesh goes back to Uruk, convinced that the only immortality man can seek is in achievement. So the events I just described to you, these extraordinary adventures, the suspense accompanying Gilgamesh's quest, are the entertaining side of the epic. However, entertainment was not its only purpose. The epic conveyed a message. It explored some basic questions, such as, what is it to be a man in the eyes of the Mesopotamian? Who are we? What are we? The Mesopotamian writer asked himself these questions. How should we come to terms with our human conditions, with our fate, with the fact that eventually we will all die one day? What is the meaning of life if you have to die? Why is life worth living? And how should we live it knowing that death is inescapable? The epic does not only ask these questions and others, but it also tries to give some answers. So, let's first try and see how the epic views man. What is it to be a man for a Mesopotamian? This question is partly answered by the early life and transformation of Enkidu. As we said at the beginning, we have symbols, we have heroes who represent these values, so we have to look at these heroes, but thinking that they represent the value that the writer wants to explain to us. So as you have already pointed out, Enkidu is pictured as living with and like wild animals, ignorant of man's ways, ignorant of civilization. Before he could become civilized, he needed to be humanized. In the state of nature, animal-like, he was not a man in the eyes of the Mesopotamian author. The process of his humanization is very clearly described. It starts when he meets the harlot, the woman brought by the trapper. What happens when he meets her and spends with her a whole week? His body was bound as though with a cord. His knees gave way when he started to run. His swiftness was gone. Enkidu was grown weak, for wisdom was in him, and the thoughts of a man were in his heart. This is what happened to him. This means that his contact with the woman broadened his understanding, awakened his intelligence. What he acquired from intercourse with a woman was the intellectual potential, power, or capacity to adopt human ways and to desire human companionship. It was not enough to be with the animals anymore. He needed humans to be his companions. So it is through contact with another human being that he is humanized. Now that his intelligence is awakened through his contact, he can become a man, that is, a human being desiring to live with other human beings in a civilized world. His animal-like aspect has disappeared, and the harlot tells him, "You are wise, Enkidu, and now you have become like a god." So for the Mesopotamians, man is neither animal nor god, he is godlike, meaning endowed with intelligence, with knowledge, and capable of civilization. So when Enkidu meets the shepherds, he is capable of imitating them, of learning their ways, and it is only then that the process of his humanization is accomplished. I quote from your text, "Then the woman said, 'Enkidu, eat bread. It is the stuff of life. Don't eat the herbs and, insects. Drink wine. It is the custom of the land.'" So he ate till he was full, and drank strong wine, 7 goblets. He became merry, his heart exulted, and his face shone. He rubbed down the matted hair of his body and anointed himself with oil. Enkidu had become a man. Something magical and decisive had happened. Enkidu has made his choice. From then on, he belonged to the human race. So to be a man, in the eyes of the Mesopotamians, starts by desiring human companionship and by knowing and adopting civilized ways. But this is only part of the answer to the question of what man is. The epic goes further and deeper in its exploration of man's identity, and the answer is given at the very end of the epic by Gilgamesh himself. What Gilgamesh, the great hero and king of Uruk, has learned from his failure in his quest for immortality is very simply the awareness of his fate, that is, his mortality. He is a man, meaning he is mortal. The awareness that death is man's lot, man's share, man's sad condition is formulated here in this epic for the first time in human history. So to be a man is first and foremost to be finite, mortal. Man is neither an animal like Enkidu in the steppe, nor a god like Utnapishtim who has gained everlasting life. Man is like Gilgamesh, an intelligent, civilized person, capable of great achievements, desirous of gaining knowledge, but whose destiny is ultimately to die. This leads us to another question posed by the Epic of Gilgamesh. How does man react to his inescapable fate, to death? Yani once you realize, if you ask yourself this question, I'm a mortal, okay. So what do I do? Do I accept the idea? Do I rebel against the idea? Do I try to change this condition? This is exactly what happened to Gilgamesh. Man's attitude towards death is the major theme of the epic, and the various attitudes or reactions that humans tend to adopt are exemplified in the epic by a single figure, that of Gilgamesh. In the beginning, the young and restless king of Uruk had only one concern: to achieve great deeds that no one before him had accomplished, and thus leave an enduring name, fame. This is what he tells Enkidu, who is reluctant and afraid to go and kill Khumbaba, the monster, the personification of evil. Enkidu tells him, Gilgamesh answers him, then if I fall, I leave behind me a name that endures. Men will say of me, Gilgamesh has fallen in fight with ferocious Khumbaba. Gilgamesh knew that he had eventually to die, and he tells Enkidu, only the gods live forever with glorious Shamash, but as for us, men, our days are numbered. So he knew that he will have to die, but he never took, death as a reality. It was something, in the abstract. So as this question clearly shows, death was known to Gilgamesh. But for him, since he had to die anyway, he wanted it to be a glorious death, in battle with a worthy foe or enemy, so that his name and fame would live. So his first attitude towards death was to seek immortality through fame. His youth, his success, his extraordinary deeds made him feel godlike, invincible, invulnerable, to the point that he dared defy the great goddess Ishtar. At the climax of his success, he became arrogant, irrespectful of the gods, and forgetful of the fact that he was but a mortal. كبر راسه يعني. So, but when Enkidu, his only and very dear friend, died, everything collapsed around him. His whole world collapsed around him. With the death of Enkidu, death touches him in its stark reality. Gilgamesh refuses with all his soul to accept it as real. The loss he has suffered is unbearable. He stands puzzled before death, before the lifeless corpse of Enkidu. He keeps him 7 days until he sees the worms eating his body. He couldn't accept the idea that he's going to be separated from his friend. This fear of death became an obsession with Gilgamesh. The thought that he, the great, the beautiful, the strong Gilgamesh, himself must die, haunted him day and night and left him no peace. With the awareness that eventually he himself will die, all his previous values collapsed. Enduring name, immortal fame suddenly meant nothing to him anymore. Real, physical immortality, an impossible goal, was the only thing Gilgamesh now wanted. He had heard about an ancestor of his called Utnapishtim who gained eternal life. He decided to go to him, to ask him, to learn the secret of his immortality. The story of the flood that you will read, in the 12th tablet of Gilgamesh, told to him by Utnapishtim, shows that the case of Utnapishtim was unique and could never happen again. Once the gods sent the flood to destroy mankind, and once only the only man who survived received immortality. But this is not going to be repeated again. So he challenges, Utnapishtim is aware of that, but he wants to prove to Gilgamesh the futility and the impossibility of his quest. He challenges him to resist sleep for a week. He told him, if you can resist sleep for a week, you can get immortality. But every night his wife was baking one bread to show Gilgamesh that he slept. Every night he couldn't resist sleep. Understandably enough, Gilgamesh fails. His failure proves how utterly impossible is his hope for energy strong enough to overcome death. When the snake snatches the plant of rejuvenation away from him, a plant that was given to him by Utnapishtim as a second, chance for him to gain immortality. So when it snatches away from him this rejuvenation plant, which can make Gilgamesh young again, he loses his last hope for immortality. The second failure, too, was due to his basic human weakness, a moment of carelessness. In other words, his quest for actual immortality defied, challenged human nature itself, the very condition of being human, mortal, finite. For the first time, as he fails twice in his undertaking, Gilgamesh is completely deprived of any heroic stature or dimension. Only then does he come back to his senses. Only then does he see himself for what he really is, as a pitiful, mortal human being, and he cries. He weeps. The panic, the fear of death leaves him, and this brings his quest for immortality to an end. It has come to nothing. He has to admit final and utter defeat, but he has gained something much more valuable. He has gained wisdom. So the mood in which he meets his final defeat is new and different from what he has been capable of before. It is a mood of resignation, an awareness of the irony of his fate, not one of terror and despair. He has found the peace he was looking for by having the courage to face and to accept reality, i.e., the fact that he is a mortal. The outcome of Gilgamesh's quest is the understanding of his human condition. He acquired wisdom, and this aspect is praised in the epic more than the heroic deeds and the quest for immortality. The Epic of Gilgamesh ends by presenting a third attitude towards death. Man has to die. We all agree. But what he achieves during his lifetime survives him. In other words, Gilgamesh now knows that the only immortality he can seek is in achievement. And Gilgamesh's last achievement stands today for us to look at, to appreciate, to admire. And these are the walls of the city of Uruk that survive to this day, the most massive, the longest, the strongest fortification wall ever built by a man. So, while exploring man's attitude towards death, the author of the epic makes a statement about how one ought to live one's life, knowing that death is inescapable. So if you know that you are going to die, how do you want me to live? What sort of meaning has my life? What should I do if I want to be happy during this short period of my lifetime? Well, the Mesopotamian author has an answer, and the answer is conveyed by Siduri, the tavern keeper, whom Gilgamesh meets on his way to Utnapishtim. She tries to dissuade him by showing him the futility of his quest, since only gods are immortal. She tells him, Gilgamesh, where are you hurrying to? You will never find that life for which you are looking. When gods created man, they allotted to him death, but life they retained in their own keeping. As for you, Gilgamesh, fill your belly with good things. Dance, feast, day and night, night and day, dance and be merry, feast and rejoice. Let your clothes be fresh. Bathe yourself in water. Cherish the little child that holds your hand, and make your wife happy in your embrace. For this too is the lot of man. So what Siduri is offering Gilgamesh is a conventional philosophy of life. This advice of hers is formulated in a way that seems addressed to the epic's audience as well, and not only to Gilgamesh. The simple pleasures advocated by Siduri, eating, drinking, having nice clothes, having a family, and so on, are something many could strive for. Each one of us can strive for these things, unlike the heroic deeds which were only for the few, for the superhumans. The sun god Shamash, here he is seated on his throne with the rays of light coming out of his shoulders. He addresses Enkidu more or less in the same way as Siduri addresses Gilgamesh. On his deathbed, Enkidu curses the harlot for having brought him to civilization. The sun god's response to Enkidu implies that the life to which the harlot has brought him was worth living, despite the untimely death it entailed. The sun god tells Enkidu, Enkidu, why are you cursing the woman, the mistress who taught you to eat bread fit for the gods and drink wine of the kings? She who put on you a magnificent garment, did she not give you glorious Gilgamesh for your companion? And has not Gilgamesh, your own brother, made you rest on a royal bed and recline on a couch at his left hand? From these lines, we understand that the epic underlines the satisfaction that civilized human life offers. In other words, that minimum amount of meaning that man's life has. This is the epic's message too. These simple pleasures, in the eyes of the Mesopotamians, were sufficient to make life worth living and enjoyable, despite the dreadful perspective of death. Man should not lose his time and energy looking or trying to get some impossible things. He should be satisfied with simple pleasures civilized life can offer him. These passages that we just mentioned were often described as hedonistic, and hedonism means to seek pleasure and avoid pain. This is what she is advising him to do. This is how life should be lived. Avoid everything that will disturb you, that will bring you pain, or that would bring you sorrow, and enjoy yourself. Take all the pleasure that you can get. So the Epic of Gilgamesh shows us also how man understood and explained his relations with the supernatural powers, the gods, who affected his life and destiny. As we can gather from the text, the Mesopotamians believed in a great number of gods and monsters, some of whom we meet in the epic, like Anu, the god of heavens, Enlil, the god of the air, Enki, Ea, the god of wisdom, and of the sweet underground waters. You have them all depicted here as the Mesopotamians imagined them or conceived them in their anthropomorphic shape. So they believed also in Ishtar, the goddess of love and war, the sun god Shamash, Humbaba, and the bull of heaven. All these gods were believed to look and act like humans. This is what we call anthropomorphic. They look like man and act like humans. But they were more powerful, and first and foremost, these gods were immortal. They interfered in man's life, either by helping or by punishing him, or often by dictating their will. Moreover, their behavior and their reactions were unpredictable. You never knew how the gods were going to react. Their decisions and decrees were often arbitrary and unfair. Thus, the general atmosphere that we can gather from the Epic of Gilgamesh is one of insecurity, of instability, and of pessimism. From the story of the flood, we learn that man was created by the gods to be their servant, their slave. In the slave-master relationship, there is no confidence, no trust. There is no reliability, no peace, no clear rule between man and the gods, no agreement, between man and the gods. Like all ancient people, Sumerians and Akkadians could not conceive that death was really the end. They believed in a life after death, in a place where man's spirit, that they called Etemu, could survive. Enkidu has a vision of the underworld, and let me read to you what is the image of the underworld that these people had. There is the house whose people sit in darkness. Dust is their food and clay their meat. They are clothed like birds with wings for covering. They see no light and they sit in darkness. Well, this is a very gloomy and depressive view of the netherworld, also called house of darkness, house of dust, land of no return. The view of life after death described by Enkidu deprives man from hope in something better than his earthly life and adds to his pessimism and despair. There is no other choice. Everyone will go there, to this place, to this land of no return, to this place that is dark, where there is no nice food, where there are no nice clothes, and so on and so forth. So Mesopotamian man dreaded death because he viewed the underworld as a place where all earthly pleasures were absent. Confronted with such a dreadful perspective, what a poor consolation were Siduri's words, and how understandable was Gilgamesh's rebellion against his fate. He does not accept it, but at the end, he has to admit it. Thank you for listening.